Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's thrilling to have so many of you join us for what is our 9th webcast in the EY Women in Tech series. The engagement and feedback we've had from the first 8 has been outstanding and great involvement from everyone. So thank you very much for that, and we hope to continue that with today's discussion. So a little bit of introduction about myself. My name is Rachel Collins, and I'm a director in EY's people consulting practice. I've spent my career working with firms to get the people they need for today and for tomorrow. And there's never been a more exciting time to do that as there is now, both to build better organisational outcomes and better outcomes for individuals. But without further ado, I should introduce my panelists, who I'm honoured to have alongside me today. So let me start with a few introductions on some of those. And bear with me, I'm going to just refer to my notes so I don't lose any of the key points on their great experience. So I'll start with Ursula Dolton, who is a technology platform director for insurance, pensions and investments at Lloyds Banking Group, and has a successful tenure as a CTO at the British Heart Foundation. Ursula complements her technical and business skills with her extensive experience from a diverse range of sectors, including financial services, automotive, higher education, and in the non-for-profit industry. She's known for being results-driven, an authentic leader, and a proven track record of directing global teams to deliver high-quality results, both enhancing customer experience and driving optimal outcomes in high-pressure environments. She attributes these achievements to her ability to keep teams motivated, focused, and aligned in strategic pursuits. So I look forward to hearing from her today. Next, I'll come to Paola Bonomo, who is a non-executive director, advisor, and business angel. She brings to the table her operational experience in a digital-first company and digital transformational journeys in traditional organisations. She works as a non-executive director on the boards of public and private companies. She was recently a member of the board that conducted and approved the largest private equity transaction in European telecommunications sector in several years. Paola is passionate about early-stage investing and helping entrepreneurs build successful companies. She serves as a vice chair at the Italian Angels for Growth, Italy's leading business angel group, and as a member of the investment committee at VC fund Neverfirst. So we welcome you today. Next, I'd like to go on to Dave Thomas, who's a VP of engineering at GoCardless, a fintech scale. He spent 7 years in different roles in fintech and previously worked in a range of roles across the UK government. He started his career as a consultant working in technology risk. He has seen firsthand the challenges in shifting culture in large bureaucratic organisations, as well as the leadership challenges that come with moving at pace required to keep up in the startup world. And last but not least, we're delighted to have back Liz McLogan, Head of Insurance Partnerships and Alliances at Moodys. Liz is focused on delivering business growth through the ecosystem partnerships by developing joint go-to-market propositions that solve for clients' business challenges. Prior to her current role, she was responsible for marketing strategy and execution across Moodys products and services. She is a supporter of diversity initiatives, serving on a multicultural BRG steering group and an active committee member of Women in Alliances, dedicated to closing the diversity gap in tech. So I welcome all of our panelists and thank you very much for joining us, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. So let's kick off with the first part of our panel discussion. And the way we're going to do this is we have a number of set questions which I'm going to take our panel members through. But as we do that, what I'd like to do is to invite the audience to help drive the discussion. So pop a question in the chat as we go along, and I'll do the best that I can to try and feed that in, okay? And anytime during the webcast, you can complete the survey by clicking at the dedicated icon at the bottom of the screen. And you'll get a number of reminders to do that before the end of the session. Okay, so let's start our first round of questions. And this is really going to be focusing on never stopping learning. So Ursula, if I can start with you. Can you describe a time when you realised your skills weren't sufficient for professional survival? And can you talk a little bit about how you address that gap in a way that worked for you?
Thanks, Rachel, and hello, everyone. I started my career as a software engineer over 25 years ago. It was all good for a while, but then I realized I wanted to do a wider leadership role. So, as usual, I did the research to see what qualifications would help me and did an MBA to bring my tech and business skills together. Most importantly, I spoke to many people who helped me get that some clarity into what I thought I wanted to do because I was really with this mindset that I will get to the senior management level once I did this set of qualifications, worked for X number of years to tick all the experience boxes. And it was, for me, a tick the box activity. Then I realized actually reality was very different to that. So now looking back, what I did learn is how I unconsciously layered on my qualifications, experience, and knowledge to by constantly upskilling myself. So to move from that, software engineering to that leadership role, I really had to consciously do that. Um, you need to do this, especially in a world where we are constantly struggling to keep up with the ever-changing technology advancements. So personally, I always look at where and how I need to upskill, and in some cases, reskill myself based on my career aspirations and tech trends as well. Uh, I constantly keep adding to this invisible backpack of knowledge, tools, skills, and experience I carry around with me. So you can visualize that there's this big backpack I tend to carry around with me. Um, this is not something you should think of only when you think, I need to look for a new job because I'm not happy with the current job, or I want to actually change my career, or I want career progression. For me, it's something that I constantly take as a norm, that upskilling, reskilling, continuous improvement. Because we should really truly embrace it as that norm to enable us to be the best we can be. Back to you, Rachel.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I think great to reflect on that realization you had that the tick boxes, the ticking through the qualifications wasn't going to do it all. And I really like that backpack analogy. It's a large backpack I think you're carrying with you and continually topping it up. So excellent, thank you. Now, if I can now bring in Paola, we know your career path has been very dynamic, shifting in between different companies and different positions. How did you manage to reinvent yourself during each of these career shifts? And did you overcome your concerns?
Yeah, by way of background, Rachel, I think there's been basically three big waves in my career. In my first wave, I was a consultant at McKinsey for several years. I was there, total time elapsed 14 years, take out 2, which I spent doing my MBA, so that's 12 years of work, which is quite, a lot more than most people do when they enter a consulting career. The second one was a managerial career in both digital companies and digital roles in companies going through some sort of transformation. And so I was a manager. I had to make the shift from consultant to manager, which is a mindset shift most of all, a shift in terms of, accountability, what you're expected to deliver in terms of business results week by week. Sometimes you're in a sales role, so you also have a quota and you have to learn how to manage that, which is an invaluable part of a management training, of course. And so I did that for about 10, 12 years in terms of different companies. And the third wave, which is the one where I'm right now, is I have a bit of a dual track. One is as a board director, so corporate governance is my day job. And the second one is investing, again, with a fund as a member of the investment committee, and also with a group of business angels. And I can talk, at length through, about the skills for each of these, but the mindset is really what matters. Because although the first transition was very disruptive, meaning that it's a completely different job and it's a completely different outlook, at the same time, you have it in the back of your mind as a consultant that you're not probably going to be a consultant for the rest of your life. At least most of us aren't. And so that transition is always, in front of you. And so you talk to people who've gone through this, from consultant to manager, and you talk to them about, what skills you're lacking and what skills you need to develop. And you learn a lot by doing that. The second transition, so from full-time executive roles in companies to this type of portfolio careers with different activities, was a bit more terrifying, right? But again, it was not a shot in the dark, because I prepared for years, through angel investing nights and weekends for the angel investing career, or by joining maybe one small board before taking on the challenges of larger and more complex boards in listed companies. So upskilling and reskilling really, for me, happened organically, so that when the transition came, I was prepared, and I was not afraid that, if I failed, I would end up living under a bridge, right? So that's how I handled those transitions, and how I felt that I was ready to go into the next phase of my career.
Thank you for that. And I think with your career history, people could look through that and go, wow, that looks impressive. I think you've really brought it alive, very human, that it was disruptive to move between waves. It could feel terrifying. And you think, is this going to work? Is this a good move? Am I going to be able to pay my bills by doing this? And actually, you've got an impressive career, but realizing you had all those normal fears that I certainly would have, and I'm sure many of the people on the call here would have. So, and that mindset just seems to be the key to it, being able to shift and that's preparing for it. Go on, sorry.
Rachel, I think another thing I'd like to add is that basically the more you progress in your career, the more it's really the soft skills that make the difference. So let me give you a very specific example. As an investor, either with a VC fund or with an early stage, angel group, your success really depends on whether you have access to the right deals. And the access is something that you learn through your network. And networking is something that, even if we think of upskilling or reskilling in terms of the hard skills, it equally applies to the soft skills, such as how to, be present and participate in your technology ecosystem or early stage investing network, whatever. Because networking is also a skill. We don't teach it to people. We don't teach it to women particularly, and it is one of the things that absolutely have to be taken into account.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And actually bringing alive that just point on networking, and it might be a theme that I think comes out through discussions with other people. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to now come to you, Dave, and would very much like your perspective, really to understand, what do you think is necessary? I'll start again. What has been necessary for you to upskill and reskill to progress your career?
Thanks, Rachel. So, hi everybody. I think building on what Paola's just said a little bit. So when you take those steps up, you're starting again. And so whether you're going down an expert track or a management track, it doesn't really matter because it's different. And so, some things Paola was talking about there, the expectation changes, and it starts to become less about what you know and more about how you deploy that knowledge and how you get people to work with you and sort of go on the journey with you. So there's a load of things in that backpack that Ursula talked about at the beginning that you're going to have to think more about, whether it's budgeting, project management, finance, the things that come into running an organization. And to some extent, you can go and get formal education on those. The big thing for me, though, is around those softer skills, where there's a lot more on influencing, storytelling, communication. And so a lot of those softer skills you can only really learn by doing. And what that means is you end up taking a role, a step up, and really taking a job that you're not necessarily practiced at, and in some cases you might not feel qualified for. So this is where your imposter syndrome kicks in big, right? And you're sitting there thinking, am I capable? Is this the thing I can do? That's really, really common. I think, as a man on this call, quite often I think that that imposter syndrome has been portrayed as something that women have, and it's not. It's just something that we all go through. And part of stepping up, part of developing is about how you manage that and how you build your confidence. So there's a couple of big things for me that really matter from a skill perspective, and they're subtly different, I think, to some of the more specific things you might talk about. So the first one is how you manage yourself. As those expectations go up, the pressure goes up, the variety goes up, the complexity goes up. So how you think about managing your time, your emotion, your self-awareness, your responsiveness to feedback, that actually as a set of skills is really super important, because not only does it help manage that imposter syndrome, but it also puts you in a position where you can actually be more helpful to others. I think the second big thing for me is around learning to get the best from those around you. So your day is going to become so constrained in many cases, you can't do things. And so how you actually deliver through others becomes, for me, one of the most important skills I've had to develop through my career. The really interesting thing with those, they're a constant learning exercise, they're a constant evolution, because what works one day may not work the next, right? They're very circumstantial. And so you end up having to continually work on your skills in those two spaces. Back to you.
Excellent, thank you for that. And I think one of the questions we've had in the chat is asking about the most in demand soft and hard skills. From what you've said, it seems like managing yourself is a top soft skill, and getting the best from others is a top soft skill.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was in discussion with an HR director from a payment firm who said, I hate the term soft skills. So I can hear her in my ear saying, it's not soft. So I think there's something really important here that says almost probably those more human skills, I think, because actually in the way you've talked about it, they're so critical, I think, and they're so important to the way we do business, as you've articulated, that we could be cautious in using the word soft because it might not fully appreciate actually the criticality of them.
Well, I think, Rachel, as well, these are some of the hardest things you can do, right? So I think they're some of the hardest skills you've got to build, rather than being soft.
Yeah, okay. One of the questions, whilst I've got you on, Dave, do you often see imposter syndrome in men, is a question that's just come up.
I think it manifests itself differently, right? Because a lot of the time with men, you see a lot more bravado, you see a far less willingness to talk about this. And so quite often, you know, my male peers will be far less willing to have these kind of conversations. A couple of drinks down the pub normally helps kind of loosen that willingness. But I think the biggest difference I've seen is that, you know, the female colleagues I've had are more open to talking about it, and they maybe talk about it more directly. Whereas I think when men talk about it, they might joke more about, oh, you know, haven't got a clue what I'm doing here, that kind of thing. So I think it is something I see. I think it's just been, because it's been made a thing that women have to talk about and men don't. It's perhaps just more visible from female colleagues, and frankly, quite often, female colleagues of mine are much more open to talking about the softer skills and how they develop them because they can see the value.
Thank you for that. And I think there's something really important in there that you're saying, that actually it's about making sure we can provide an environment where everyone can actually be at their best and thrive, because to be honest, that's the talent that we need within the technology industry. There's no one perfect answer because we need different perspectives. And it's actually those things like, but there are common things which we're all going to need, which is what you've kind of talked to, which are going to be key. Okay. Thank you very much for that, Dave. I'd like to come on to Liz. And I think this might go into some of the questions that we've actually heard. So I'd really like to start thinking about some practical tips. I'm sure that's what a few people in the audience, and this sounds great, but so if I can ask you, Liz, can you share your perspectives on how you actually go about reskilling and upskilling, and any examples you can give for individuals that are going to be key for them to be successful in evolving their career?
Sure. Thanks, Rachel, and thanks everybody for joining today. I guess, my own upskilling and reskilling journey has been driven similar to my other panelists is the fact that, I've changed roles a lot through my career, but often those roles have sort of happened and they haven't particularly been sought. So you end up in this new role, which is exciting, but yet without some of the skills or the learnings that you might need to thrive in that role and be taken seriously in the role. So, I mean, I do strongly believe that each individual probably needs to take ownership for their own learning journey. But of course, I think it's also great if organizations also more deliberate in prioritizing workforce skill development. I suppose in my case, there are aspects that are offered through my organization to help with learning and development, but a lot of what I had identified as what I needed to learn and to upskill to do better in my role really needed to be arrived at through self-assessment and then putting in practice upskilling practices which I kind of thought about myself and then took action on myself. I guess really a good place to start is to kind of conduct a self-assessment of what your current knowledge is, and then identify areas that you want to improve your skills, but also where maybe industry developments have outpaced your own expertise. I also think it's really helpful to align your skill development objectives with your role and what you can maybe achieve and put into practice in your own existing role. I mean, I think for a reskilling and you want to change career, then maybe that is a much more focused training through university or courses. But yeah, for me, it's really been to focus on skills that have an immediate impact in my role. And I guess some of the three maybe key approaches that I've taken was one, to join some women-focused technology groups. There are many organizations out there, but they really are built to create an inclusive environment for women in technology. And they're a fantastic resource for upskilling through peer-to-peer interactions, networking that we've talked about, learning through events and cross-pollination initiatives. And, you can ask questions of similarly motivated women and men who are in technology. I guess there's also on-the-job learning, which I found very helpful. So seeking secondments to other teams within your organization to upskill on product development, for example, and how customers use your products. I think meeting regularly with the customer-focused team, so sales teams, and joining sales calls have also been really helpful methods that I've used. And, for example, I identified that I wasn't really the most confident negotiator. So I took some online courses to become a better negotiator, very much onto the soft skills topic. But then I worked with my sales colleagues and tried to pick up tips from them that I could mirror. And I guess finally, obviously there's a lot of podcasts, blogs, articles. I mean, there's so much information and resources out there. I think it's about finding the format that works for you, what's easy to consume, what you can then put into practice at work. And that will help you achieve your goals. But I do really believe it is something that you need to take ownership of yourself, and find ways to upskill that work for you, and that can be applied to your role.
And thank you for that, Liz. And we've had a question that's come in which talked about strategic moves. You've talked about kind of doing projects or secondments. Would you say that sometimes taking a decision to move role completely is quite important for upskilling and reskilling?
I mean, I think absolutely. If you make that decision to change roles completely, I think it was Ursula mentioned it at the beginning. It is important to think about what that role is. What are the requirements to do that role? And I think there, some reskilling is probably quite valuable to be able to then try and transition into a new role that you might have identified.
Excellent, thank you. And there's just a specific question from the chat that says, which women in tech support bodies? Where you mentioned that. Can you say which ones you'd refer to?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a particular fan of Women in FinTech. Women in European Payments Network is another really good one. I know these are they're very active groups. I myself am in Women in Alliances, and that's a very nice, supportive group of women who meet regularly to discuss, what's happening in the industry. Yeah, to name a few.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to come on now to our second round of questions. And this is really about staying relevant for women in tech. And I'm going to start with Paola. And I'd really like to hear from you first. What advice would you give to women out there thinking about a change in their career? Which are the items to be considered before taking those steps?
Thanks, Rachel. First of all, I would start from, again, mindset. Have the right metaphor in mind for your career. And I think, we've been trained to think of this as a ladder or a staircase with a lot of steps, right? And I think the reality is much messier than that. The reality is that it's not a ladder, it's a forest, a savanna, a lagoon. Choose your favorite ecosystem, right? So choose the ecosystem where you can carve out your niche, and in your niche really be outstanding and recognized for the contribution that you make. So the ladder, I think, has to go a little bit, because it's not really what happens in real life, at least for most of us. The second thought is you shouldn't be thinking of, learning, upskilling, reskilling for the next step again, because that ladder doesn't work. You should really be thinking about learning for the sake of learning. And I'll give you a couple of examples. About 3 years ago, we were still under lockdown from the pandemic over here in most of Europe, but I took an online course with Stanford Continuing Studies. So just like Stanford, which is my MBA alma mater, probably your universities have, continuing studies, things that they organize where alumni or non-alumni can sign up, and for very reasonable fees, you have access to top instructors and professors. And I took a course in statistics for artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science, which was statistics, right? But because, the last time I'd taken stats was in, college back, whatever, decades ago, I really felt I needed to refresh and review a lot of those concepts and put it together with the latest tools in data science. So I did very much like Liz talked about earlier, look at things that can be even, online courses, self-directed training, do your self-assessment and put it in practice. Another one that I did about a year ago was something on a platform called Udemy, which is, is one of those platforms where you have, again, people teaching courses that you can take for a very reasonable fee. And I took something called Master LangChain with no code tools, which is probably a mouthful. But at the time it served to put together in a chain different LLMs, different large language models to build an agent to do some tasks and do it without being particularly skillful at coding. So I did that, for fun. I did that because I wanted to understand a lot of the things that startups were telling me their tools would do. And I did that not because I would, become a LangChain developer in my day job, but because I considered it part of my general culture. So learning for the sake of learning, I think, is phenomenally useful. So next week, a couple of weeks from now, I go to a conference called Digital Design Days, not because I'm a digital designer, but because I find it interesting to being around people who think deeply around about design and the ecosystem that surrounds it. And the third thing, which is really the philosophy underlying it all, is that in transition, you have to experiment. There's a very good book that came out maybe 20 years ago by Herminia Ibarra, who is a professor at INSEAD, and the title was Working Identity. And they had a lot of stories of people going from one career to another, and the way they did this successfully by putting in place, some what she calls experiments, has remained incredibly relevant. I think now there's a updated second edition and so on. And this is what I always recommend to people thinking about what to do next in their careers, or their lagoons or forests or savannas, as the case may be.
That's excellent, thank you. And I think there's lots of conversation about career ladders no longer exist. You climb up it's not there anymore as roles change. And I think the way you've just talked about carving that out, I think that's brilliant and can really resonate with people. I'm also quite on that learning piece. What I love about that is I'd have seen those courses and gone, oh, they're not for me. I couldn't do that. There'll be other people. Actually, it just sounds like you've been curious and you've gone, I'm going to do it. And there's no reason why not. And you've got yourself there and had a great experience, which I think many people can hear learn from. And then certain that the experiment sounds great. And I think even tips from 20 years ago still resonate today. So thank you. Okay, I'll then come on to Dave next. In my next question, what advice would you share with other tech leaders to help shape the environment where everyone can succeed?
That's a really good question, and thanks, Rachel. So there's three big things for me, but before I get into those, I think the wrapper that goes around all this is you have to actually care about this. So if you're kind of paying lip service to what I'm about to say, then actually it's a waste of time, because people can see through the kind of people who are turning the handle and just going through the motions. So if you don't really care about creating those kind of environments, it's really difficult to actually force it. So three big things for me. So the first one is leading by example. Whether you like it or not, you do. So how you behave, how you turn up actually really matters. So concrete examples, if you don't want bias in your recruitment processes, well, make sure when you're recruiting people, you're role modeling that behavior, making sure you're calling out the behaviors that account as a company culture, making sure you're stepping in where it's necessary. So I think leadership by example is a huge part of this. And second to that is listening, and doing so really actively. So irrespective whether you agree with people or whether you actually act on what they're saying, you need to actually be demonstrating that you're hearing them. People want to be heard, they want their opinions to be impactful and to matter. So that ability to listen really actively, and if you disagree and if you're not going to act on it, that is fine, but you can be clear in those decisions. So I think that makes you approachable, right? And it means you're somebody that people feel they can engage with. And then I think the final big one for me as a leader is mentoring, being available internally and externally to people to support them individually in their journey, because you've managed to get somewhere by hook or by crook, often more luck than judgment, I think, a lot of the time. And so being able to pass on some of the things we're talking about today is super important. So for me, yeah, if you can lead by example, if you can listen, and if you can just be available to support people, that goes a long way to helping the environment. But it has to be a thing you do because it matters to you, rather than somebody put it on your objectives for the month.
Excellent, thank you for that, David. I think your premise, the wrapper, was you have to care, and I think there's two elements of that. That's the core that what matters. And actually, if you do care, then putting that at the heart of it, I'm sure many people do. That's probably the key thing here. And I'm sure that's why people are on the call here. And you said leading by example, listen, and then being available, actually keeping it simple to those few things. So thank you very much for that, Dave. Okay, Liz, I'm going to move on to you now. Okay, and really, I want to hear a little bit about Moodys and see if what lessons we can learn from your organisation. How have Moodys supported individuals to reskill and upskill? And what type of activities have enabled this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't want to, I'm obviously a bit biased, but I mean, I do think that Moodys does a pretty good job of offering courses for the advantage of, but I think to Dave's point, you need to want to take advantage of them yourself. It has to be quite self-led. but the offerings are there, and I'm pretty confident that a lot of other large organizations have similar. I guess some of the things I'll call out are some external partnerships that Moodys has built, which add value to the upskilling and reskilling strategies of the organization. So for example, we have, partnerships with AWS and Microsoft, probably like most, but that's a great way to get technology certifications, to help understand their technologies and how to build better on those technologies. But then more for the soft skills, we have partnerships with the likes of Women in Banking and Finance, who offer training courses on, more leadership related topics, or even, confidence building topics, how to present, etc. I think for returners to work and graduates, where there needs to be quite a focus on having a structured path for upskilling and reskilling. I think I'm seeing a lot of these returners programs at the moment, which are great, and they're very well structured with established learning paths, internal mentoring and coaching from careers teams, both internally and externally to the organization. We talked about Udemy. Moodys also has an online university with access to certifications, even online degree programs like MBAs. But they offer really a balanced variety of learning methods and resources, which are really easy to consume when and wherever you want to. Moodys is also a very open environment for employees to apply to new roles, and often this is really encouraged, and it's a great way to foster upskilling and reskilling within the organization. And, as you mentioned in my bio, I'm a big fan of the employee resource groups, the business resource groups, of which we have many at Moodys. And, obviously these are about fostering diversity, but at the same time, they're a great way to learn about different parts of the organization, colleagues across the organization. And these groups put on some very valuable learning events, etc., that employees can take advantage of. And I will also highlight, the example of AI. I mean, this is a technology that is, in demand. It's requiring implementation, utilization, upskilling techniques from everybody in the organization. And Moodys did develop a curriculum which was for all employees to participate in, engage around AI, and we had this motto of we're going to be 14,000 innovators, and it was really driven from the top. It was part of the corporate scorecard that the organization would upskill on AI, and this is still ongoing. And the result of that was a 99% uptake in the training across the organization, which is higher than even some of the cybersecurity training that we have to go through, mandatory and across the organization. So I thought that was a really nice initiative. I see a lot of other employers pushing this type of initiative, especially around climate change, ESG, cyber risk. And I think that's a really good way to get engagement from the employee base, and ensure in a way that everybody's upskilling is happening at the same time, and everybody's building that foundational knowledge which is required for the organization to remain competitive. So some good things I see at Moodys, and I do see this reflected in other organizations around the globe as well, putting in place similar initiatives.
And thank you for that, Liz. And a few things which stood out there, and I think from some of the clients I've worked with, they struggle with a few of these things. One of them is it's encouraged to move roles and apply for other jobs. I think that in itself is something which is important to this, and you've raised it, it's something you do well in Moodys. You can get people being a bit protective. Oh, I'm keeping that talent, they're good. And we all know that that's not good for the organisation or individuals. I think the other thing which you've said about actually getting people excited around some of the key skills they need to learn for the organization to be better. Often people say, how how do we get everyone learning on the 4 or 5 things, if it's sustainability, AI? And I think what's really nice in what you've said is, you know, we want to be 14,000 innovators. Innovation doesn't happen on the 3rd floor. You know, innovation doesn't happen just in the senior managers. Innovation is something we all do, which I really like, and I really like the engagement you got as a result of that. Okay.
Yes, I agree.
One question I will ask, there's a few questions about assessment. So to what extent, and does Moodys do it encourage you to either self-assess your skills, or do you assess people at certain stages in their career to help them kind of guide and steer their learning?
I mean, I suppose the assessment, you know, obviously happens within your role. So if if within your role you notice that you have a skills gap, you know, often that can be, you know, that will be discussed with your manager, and that can be put into your objectives and tracked that way. Personally, I feel that, you know, the self-assessment does maybe need to come from you as an individual, and thinking about what your goals are, what, you know, what industry you might like to work in, or what role you might like to work in, and then really building out a bit of a learning path for yourself, which you think is achievable, given that, you know, we are all limited in time that we can dedicate to this. I think, you know, self-reflection on those topics is really important to make it successful.
Thank you very much for that. And I think that's something important for us all, and then also as leaders, how we can encourage our people. Okay, thank you very much. I'm now going to move on to Ursula for really a final question in this section. Is really, in today's world, it can be difficult to focus because we're in an environment where there's just information overload. So really wanted your guidance on how actually some of the younger generations can succeed, all of us really, I suspect, in this overload environment.
Absolutely, Rachel. This is so true. Because we talked about doing the research, talking to people and taking various approaches. And to Lisa's point, like even at Lloyds Banking Group, we really focus on that teaching, learning, and I feel so privileged to be working for an organization where they're really encouraging us to do that constant learning. But as you say, how can we really support, you know, the other employees, the younger generation, you know, as leaders, to really focus on that right thing to do? What is the most appropriate thing for them to do? So I'm a strong believer in mentoring. I love mentoring, and this is something I do with pride. And I'm very lucky, again, for an employer who encourages all of us to do mentoring. Plus, at work, we have a very strong network that supports women, I mean, any individual, to be honest, at any stage of their career. And for women, it's called Women Connect Tech Network. So similar to what Moodys said in their organization, we really focus on where we support women with the technology and data capabilities. And even I myself recently went through all the AI training and all that, you know, we are really encouraged to take on. And then support with growth and promotion, and that, you know, moving across to actually really identify opportunities and, you know, for that career growth opportunity. Again, I did the same just a couple of months ago. I started my new role. So they encourage us to do as leaders. And then by us doing this as leaders, that really helps us give that right guidance to our colleagues, our junior colleagues, to see, okay, this is how you can do it. Because we're not really actually explaining, oh, theoretically, this is how you can do it. We're really talking from experience. This is how I did it. This is how you can do it as well. And if we don't know, we know where to go to get that guidance. And we're really, truly encouraged to do that. Plus, we have many structured programs to support all these amazing, talented females in the organization with their career growth opportunities. Then I mentioned about taking some time to listen, because it's easy when somebody comes to you saying, oh, can you be your mentor? Can you give me that guidance? But to be that good mentor, to give them that the most appropriate guidance, we have to really listen. We have to truly understand and give much more tailored direction to them. So this is so important to something we have done. I actually introduced this initiative in my previous area, reverse mentoring, because we have to really take the time to understand these individuals. And I thought, actually, I'm really keen to learn about their world, how they actually operate. So we introduced reverse mentoring, which is working really well. Also, I feel I learn a lot from my 15-year-old daughter because she's doing computer science for her GCSE at the moment, and we're big into Python coding at the moment. And I thought, actually, this is brilliant because it gives me that different perspective to support that the next generation in that pipeline of talent. So it's learning from everybody you really meet, taking the time to listen, understand, so we can actually give them the right guidance, that right direction of travel, because otherwise it's just so daunting.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And I've got to, of course, comment on that bit of you learning from your daughter. And I think there's something great there about it can be easy sometimes to slip into, I'm the senior one, I know what I'm doing, I'm the experienced one, but that actually learning from the world around you. I was very fortunate to be at a conference where I was talking about Gen Z and what they demand as what they want differently at work. And then we got one of the audience members who was from Gen Z to come up and say actually what they need to do to succeed. And I think that that's really important there. Actually listen, understand those different perspectives and engage in people in the right way. I'm sure you're saying, actually, what can I learn about Python? What might be useful for me? And you're starting that dialogue with people about, hold on, you've got some insight that could really help me learn, and just being curious about it and being interested and listening. Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for that. I'm wary of time, so I do want to see if we can make sure we can get through our third round of questions as well about staying relevant, which you've already started to touch on. And Dave, I'd like to come to you here. So artificial intelligence, AI, it's come up already. How do you effectively integrate technology with business strategy and stay relevant and that continuing learning? How can you provide any insight or reflections?
Yeah, I'll try and do this quickly. I'm conscious of time too, but I think the big thing is this is hard and it takes a lot of discipline because you've got to keep going with it. And I want to really build on some things that Paola said earlier on. So there's two things for me. So the first one is building your network. Right? It's different for everybody, but I spend a lot of my time, because we're a fintech, we've got investors, so I've got good access to lots of other startups. And so I spend a lot of my time talking to other startups, understanding their problems, sharing mine, and you get a really good insight into the next generation of tech, how founders are thinking about things today and how they're trying to solve technology problems. Depending on your role and your organization, that network may look or feel slightly different. But for me, that's a really great way to understand what's coming next and how it's starting to build. And yeah, oddly enough, everything at the moment has some variant of AI built in, bolted on, or wrapped around it, right? You can't escape it. The second thing, again, builds on what Paola said earlier, which is learn. And this can be quite difficult. You've got 160 odd hours in the week and you've got a huge amount of commitments. How do you then teach yourself stuff? I think that for me, the way I approach this is I block time out. In the working day, once a week, there'll be half a day where it's just blocked. Do not book. I'm reading, learning. And the thing that is really important is to not apologize for that, because people often will say, well, I'm not doing anything valuable at this point. But actually, particularly as a leader, spending that time doing the learning, whether it is reading or it's Udemy or whatever else, that's really important. So doing those two things, really time consuming, but it is a really valuable part of that kind of stay relevant and keep abreast of what's going on.
Thank you for that. There's two things in there. There's leading by example, yeah, and I think that's key. Is that's so important for you to be able to role model that to the others. And I think the idea of blocking out half a day, as soon as you said that, I felt a little bit nervous. Oh, could I do that? But I think it's something about saying, hold on, I need to do this. I need to do this to continue to be able to do my job well, to be able to deliver the best and thrive, and being confident and comfortable to be able to do that. So I think that that's something really important that you've brought out there. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I think, Liz, I'd now like to move on to onto you. In your role, you've had a clear focus on external clients, and it's important to understand organisations and technologies. But can I ask you about sharing your views to continue to remain relevant and up to speed on what's happening in the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. Just checking you can still hear me. I had to swap microphones. Can you still hear me?
Perfect.
Yes.
I can hear you perfectly. Yes. All good.
Good. Yeah, so I won't spend too much on this either. I mean, I do totally concur with Dave on the networking. So expanding your professional network to learn from others who are in the market. I mean, obviously that can be done through LinkedIn and social media. What I find very interesting is to follow people on LinkedIn who I know are in the industry that I'm in, or who have, you know, very valuable ideas on certain topics. And I think that's a great way to see what webinars are they attending, what events are they going to, and not that I want to stalk them, but just that it's a great way to sort of hear other perspectives and find different sources of learning. I also think, you know, working with industry associations is also a very valuable way to, you know, leverage training that they may have and connect with others in the market. And, you know, collaborating with your peers who are serving the same customers. And I think a good example of this is our collaboration of Moodys with EY, which, you know, really does provide a forum with peers in the market to discuss industry trends, customer preferences, and new technologies, and how customers are adopting these, you know, these technologies. And I guess also finally, you know, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. So getting involved in projects which maybe you think, oh gosh, I don't know anything about this, I shouldn't really be involved. But if you have the opportunity to get involved, I think you should embrace it. You know, I had that recently with some, you know, some projects around climate. And at the beginning, I did sit there thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have anything to bring to this conversation. But as you got into it, you realized everybody was learning, and it was just a great way to immerse yourself in a topic with industry practitioners and, you know, get some great learnings of both for yourself personally, but also that you can take back to your organization to then inform, you know, product development initiatives and different strategies, etc.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I think also it kind of builds on one of your other comments earlier on about there's those opportunities there, but also learning from your customers as well. And probably the listening to your customers is a key, but you can only continue to do that, but also listen to your customers and keeping close to them, because actually then you can create a significant impact.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for that. I'm now going to move on to Ursula. So you have transitioned across different types of organizations, from global, small, non-profit. I think you've touched on this already, but I think just to summarize would be great to hear how you've adapted, about how you've adapted at each step of those. And it would be good if you could just really summarize that, as we think you've got to evolve, you've got to continue to stay relevant, and have you continued to do that through those different waves of your career?
Oh, yes, Rachel. I have had one of those proper squiggly careers, you may call it.
Yeah.
So it was out of necessity more than actually choice. But to actually quickly summarize, I would say three things. One is the concept that invisible rucksack I mentioned earlier. It's like identifying those tools of the trade. So I am a strong believer of that. So that knowledge, skills, experience, and adding to it consistently with the most relevant tools is so important. I'm like a sponge. I like, you know, Liz mentioned about different ways of like, you know, constantly learning and all that. And that's something I do all the time, and that's something I encourage everybody to do so as well. And then adaptability, it's so important, isn't it? For me, it comes down to most of the time looking inwards. truly understanding my strengths and my weaknesses. So when you go to any organization, you've got to first really truly understand, how am I going to really deal with this? Being self-aware, taking the time to then understand the role remit in a global organization versus a small organization. That's so important because they tend to vary. And we discussed about soft skills and hard skills earlier. The success comes to how well you build relationships. When you join any organization, I think that's one of those core things you've got to really focus on as well. Build relationships. We cannot deliver tech alone. We have to collaborate. We have to be a team player. And they're my top 3 things I've really learned throughout my squiggly career.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And thank you for sharing that. I think, again, we've heard that importance of that self-awareness. And it's difficult, isn't it, to be aware enough on your own skills and the environment you're in and be curious within it. So I think that's been really key in that success. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to now come on to Paola. We understand that actually there's, always be learning, and that's something we've talked about. How meaningful has it been to you to do learning on the job throughout your professional journey?
It's the main type of learning, really. I've had lots of structured learning experiences, such as, leadership development in companies out of Silicon Valley, which are fantastic because, when you work in those companies, which is a fantastic opportunity and a privilege, you have the best coaches in the world, you have the best training programs, you go on the Santa Cruz Mountains for a week and so on. But then the real learning happens in your day job and maybe even in small details that, you would never have imagined. I'll give you another example. There's lots of training courses right now for corporate governance. So how to be a board member. And of course, people go to these courses and they learn, how you behave as a board member, on a public company and its, complexities on a private equity type of situation or in a family-owned company. And those are all different. And you get a bit of a, information about each of these situations. But then when you are in the job, that's where you really, really discover what it's like. And for me, quite frankly, the biggest learnings have come from observing people who were more experienced than I was and more skilled operators on a board level, meaning that they really knew how to steer the board in a certain direction to make the right decision that was good for all the shareholders. So yes, you will maybe go into a situation saying, okay, I'm on the board of a tech company, for example. So I've done the strategy in my life as a consultant and I know tech because I've been a manager in a tech environment, and I'll put these together and I will do my thing. And that is not enough because you will also have to learn about policy. You will have the implementation of the AI Act. You will learn about antitrust law. You will learn about labor regulation. You will learn about compliance and anti-money laundering, which you never thought you would learn, right? Because you didn't know it was necessary when you were on a board. But you do all these things on the job, hopefully, supported by resources of the company and the board secretary and the managers, etc. But that's every day is like, basically training on the job. So that never stops and it will never end until the day you quit working.
Thank you very much for that. And it's almost as if, and I'll probably, as I kind of finish up today, I'll be saying to myself, what have I learned today? Or tomorrow, as I start my new day, what am I going to learn? How am I going to embrace that? And I think that there's something, quite, just observing and looking around you, you can learn a huge amount as well, both in person or virtually. So I think there's some really, really helpful things there that actually sometimes, it's, as you say, it's that mindset has been around and creating the kind of curiosity within yourself to be able to learn. Okay, we are coming up to 1/2 the hour. I think I will probably just, we've had lots of great things there. I'll probably just go around the table very quickly. One top tip from everyone to just on across really from today on that journey to leadership. So Liz, can I ask you one top tip from today?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, employers should recognize the motivation and curiosity of their employees to want to upskill, and should support them on that journey maybe a little more than they are currently.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for that, Liz. Dave, can I come to you next? One top tip?
I'd say make yourself uncomfortable. So go for things you're not ready for. Don't wait until you're sure it's going to be fine. You've got to take the leap.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Paola?
Yes, I want to build on something that in different ways Liz and Dave and Ursula have also talked about, which is build your network, not just inside your company, but also externally. Because it doesn't work, you know, for your career if everybody knows you in your company because you're central, you have a pivotal role, you solve all the problems that everybody has, but then nobody knows you outside the company.
Excellent, thank you. Ursula?
And I can round it up by saying from all those people, don't hesitate to ask for help and guidance, because they are always very eager to support you.
Thank you very much. So today, first I'd like to say thank you to all of our panelists for your insight, your experience, and your frankness. It's been a brilliant discussion. I hope for those who have listened in have found it as helpful as I personally have. So we've run over the 1/2 hour, but I'd like to say thank you very much, and I'll close the webcast there. Thank you.